Alrighty, today I am joined with Nathan Baxter. Nathan, I've known you as a powerlifting extraordinaire for a little while now. My wife knows you as the judge or the referee that she can hear. I think it was 2015 Nationals. Mentioned that she was a bit of hard of hearing, and she's the only one. She reckons that you're the only one with a loud enough voice as a referee. So there you go.
Nice. I like that. I think I'll give Max Bristow the credit for that. Having
Yep.
to I did my my national level referee ticket at 2008 Nationals in Newcastle, and Max was. I don't think Max could hear probably from the age of 40. And so he was pretty deaf by this time already. And so I was doing hand gestures and yelling at him for the bench calls.
Yeah.
And so I just never went back to a normal voice. I know for me, even at big comps, I could barely hear referees' calls.
Yeah.
So I always tried to be the referee that I wanted on the platform.
Yep, absolutely. Max is still lifting. He had a comp, must have been 2 or 3 weeks ago. He's still deadlifting like 180 or something like that.
And he's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, mate. Let's talk a little bit about you. I don't know much about your upbringing and your sort of background in sport and stuff like that. So I guess where did you grow up and what sort of sports did you play as a kid?
Oh, I grew up half in the northern suburbs of Sydney and then half in the northern suburbs of Perth. So I was in North Ryde in Sydney, right in the middle of North Sydney Bears territory. And we were the only house in our street that used to sport blue and yellow. We were mad Eels fans. I grew up playing rugby league and soccer. It might surprise you to find out that I was a prop my whole life. I was born big and I was made for the front row. So I loved league, especially. I loved the the physicality of it, of just being able to smash, because really that's sort of 80s and 90s rugby league. That's all you did as a prop, was just run straight and have somebody run straight at you.
Yeah.
I switched to rugby union, still as a prop, when I moved to Perth. Had pretty good success there. Played state level baseball as well at the same time, and sort of got to the point where the speed of the game, especially in baseball, changed. And a few of the guys that I played with end up, one guy played in the major leagues. A few guys played minor league baseball in America. But just that quickness, when that went up a level, I couldn't keep up. So I stopped playing baseball, and then I stopped playing rugby when I moved to the northwest of WA. It was 16 hours north of Perth, little mining town on the edge of the desert. So there was no rugby, no baseball, no sport, but there was a gym. A couple of old ironheads had lived up there for years and had just collected pieces of equipment and had it stored above a squash court. And so that's how I got into, that's partially how I got into lifting weights. I used to lift for rugby. But I figured while I was up there, I was always much better at training than playing rugby. I was really good with the strength stuff. I was good at scrummaging, but as far as gameplay goes, I might have got to a sort of semi-professional level, but I think I was probably capped out in rugby where I got to. But so I found this little gym in the northwest, and we would train all year round, no air conditioning, and outside it would be between 45 and 50 degrees when you hit December, January.
And you're above a squash court too.
You're above the squash court.
So It's at least 60 degrees in there.
Right. And it was all just tin and brick. And we had a fan that was about this big, just a little portable fan from Kmart that sort of waved around a little bit, did nothing at all. But that was my introduction to the discipline it took to be good at really anything. And in this case, became good at powerlifting.
Awesome. Mate, I didn't know you played baseball. That's a really cool sport. Played a lot of years of baseball myself and played all over the place. With your baseball, did you just play in Perth or did you play in Sydney as well?
Played both. Yeah.
Played in both? Yep. Who'd you
Yeah.
play for up in Sydney?
Rugby league, I played for my school.
Yep.
Soccer, I played for I don't know what we'll call it, like the North Ride something.
Yep.
And then for rugby union, I played for the Wanneroo Roo Dogs in Perth.
Okay. Cool.
I'm now coaching for Cottesloe, which is like if you go sort of Sydney terms, is like going out to the eastern suburbs.
Yep.
Cottesloe is right on the coast here, lots of money. Wanneroo, where I'm from, is working class. Lots of tradesmen, guys that drove tow trucks. So for me now, I'm going from the working class club, and I'm coaching the rich guys that drink champagne and Chardonnay. So it's good fun.
Good mixture.
My baseball claim to fame, though, is I played with this guy, Clayton Byrne was his name. I played T-ball against him. I played junior baseball. I played senior baseball against him. And for every representative position, he would beat me up because we both played third base. And he would always beat me up. And I was sure that I was just crap at baseball because Clayton always beat me. Clayton played 5 or 6 years for the Baltimore Orioles by the end. So my big claim was going, the only person that could beat me was a Major League Baseballer. So I'm happy now.
Yep. No mean feat there. Not many Aussies over there playing in the major leagues, that's for sure. It's growing now, obviously, but
yeah. I think Clayton was one of there's a couple of guys from around this area, Clayton, Jared Prosper, there was a few others that they were kind of like journeymen. They weren't always starters, but they were always on a roster. They weren't what was his name? They weren't like Graham Lloyd playing for the Yankees and getting heaps of reviews, or Dave Nielsen at the Brewers. They were just guys that were earning a living, and I think they paved the way for a lot of the younger guys that now come through the college ranks in the US.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, let's go back to your powerlifting. So you're up in the boondocks in WA, in a little mining town. Started lifting some weights with a few fellas. How did you get involved then in the competition side of powerlifting?
So how did that happen? I sort of didn't have much of a goal with training for the longest time, and I just wanted to get stronger. Actually, no, that's a lie. Mostly, I wanted to get better looking. I like the side of lifting weights where you take your shirt off and you look ripped and you put on fake tan. So I'm saying I come from a bodybuilding background. I loved bodybuilding. I still do. I'm right into it. But then someone said, there's this thing called powerlifting where you just get really strong and you don't have to worry about losing weight all the time. And so I started getting more interested in that side of things because dieting that sucks. I hate it. I was never good at that. So, I just committed to a year of powerlifting to see where I could get my lifts to. They were looking pretty decent. So I was like a 200 raw bench, 300 raw squat was my targets. I've never had a deadlift target in my life. I only have targets for subtotals. So that got to 300, 200 raw. So I thought, that's decent. I read an article by Dave Tate on Elite Fitness Systems that said you can't call yourself a powerlifter unless you get on the platform. So I thought, all right, let's have a look at this. So I looked around 2006 Nationals and looked at the results, and I worked out I would have come second to Adam Pinkard, which is, I think pretty awesome. But what I'd done in my head up until that point was I was in a tiny, tiny town at this stage. I'm going, well, I'm the strongest guy in the gym. Who cares? It's a small gym. Oh, I might be the strongest guy in town. Who cares? It's a small town. I just thought I was a big fish in a really little pond. And then when I found out, oh no, I'm a decent sized fish in a decent sized pond, I thought, well, I'm going to have to go do a comp now.
Yeah.
So I rang around a whole bunch of people. Full disclosure, I rang Capo 5 times first. I had no intention of ever lifting with Powerlifting Australia. I didn't understand about drug-free, non-drug-free. I just knew the guy that headed up Capo in WA was the guy that taught me how to squat when I was 15. So I'm like, let's do that. It's Adam Coe. He's a really cool guy. Let's follow him. But all the people with Capo just never answered their phone. I called the WA PA representative. He didn't pick up his phone either. And unfortunately, I don't know how it goes, Robert Wilkes picked up his phone on the second ring. So I picked this comp. We put on a comp in April 2007 here in Perth, put up some really big numbers, then went to nationals that year, should have broken the bench record, and then went to Oceanias at the end of the year, had a great time. And by that stage, having my second comp being nationals and third comp being Oceanias, I'm kind of hooked by that stage.
Yeah. So back that stage, 2006, 2007, that would have been all equipped, wouldn't it?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, it was all equipped. Although I think at my first comp, I didn't own knee wraps. I had a squat suit from I think the 80s. It was old. My bench shirt I could put on was an old F6 that I could put on by myself.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of raw, kind of equipped.
Yeah.
I liked those days because nobody really cared how tight the equipment was. And if you could use tight equipment, it was always, wow, you're amazing. That's no one else can do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was mostly equipped.
And what's your thoughts now, I guess, on, Raw's sort of overcome the equipped and, it's moving forward. There's not too many people out there lifting equipped anymore. In Australia, I will say.
Yeah,
Sorry,
in Australia.
What's your thoughts on Australia sort of going forward with trying to get equipped back up and, at its best again?
Oh, yeah, I think there's probably two thoughts I have about that. Is the first one, Australians have never quite gotten into Formula One racing, but we love touring cars. And if you look at powerlifting, compare powerlifting, Formula One is a single ply bench shirt, single ply squat suit. That's the top tier. Anywhere in Europe or America, that's where the best athletes are.
Yeah.
But you can't tell me that watching the touring cars at Bathurst isn't the best weekend of the year. It's fun. I love Raw. I think I don't know. Raw feels like hanging out in the gym with a bunch of your mates, just talking shit, having fun.
Yeah.
So I think naturally Aussies will always lean towards raw lifting. But I think there's always going to be people that love that next level of precision and want to find out how deep they can go on technique and that really precise lifting technique that you need to be good at equipped lifting. And the more guys and girls that do that, the more they're going to realize that only benefits their raw technique.
Yeah.
In saying that, I look at the knee wrap or the knee sleeves people wear now. I'm going, they're not that far off a 2-meter knee wrap. So I think it'll probably go in waves. I remember the big multiply push in the 2000s where guys were wearing quad grid stitch bench shirts with titanium reinforcements and hydraulic jacks in their back or whatever. It's nuts, but and it was called, I think it was called the overkill bench shirt for a reason. It's total overkill, and guys lost interest in it. And then Raw kicks in, and then it'll swing back to center again, and I think single ply will become really popular.
Yeah. I love lifting equipped. It's just a different level of lifting, that's for sure. We're getting to see lots of people, I guess, coming into the sport though with Raw. It's pretty low barrier to entry sort of thing, and anyone can go and lift, which is fantastic. Grab yourself a soft suit and away you go. But yeah, the sport is definitely growing in Australia, but it's obviously towards that raw side.
Yeah, I just think anybody using barbells, like the more I see people using barbells, the happier I am.
Yeah.
So for me, I really don't care if it's raw powerlifting, equipped powerlifting, Olympic lifting, CrossFit. I just love that people interact with barbells these days and not machines, and far less running. So I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, I'm not up for running either. Mate. All right, so yeah,
I don't need to run for a bus.
What was that?
I said I don't even run for a bus. If I'm running late, I'll just be late. There's no running in my life anymore.
Fair call. Fair call. All right, mate. So back to 2007, 2008. Now you got a few national titles on the cards, coming forward. Tell us some of your best numbers, I guess, in competitions.
I know the ones that I remember the most was the 340 in Sweden, which was ended up being my last comp at Bench Worlds up there. That was a great old time. The 330 that I did in Newcastle, I almost bailed on that the night before. I was feeling really bad. I wasn't feeling well, and there was a whole lot of flight problems on Friday getting from Craft to Newcastle, and then I was hanging out on Saturday with my mate, and I'm just going, man, I feel like going home. Do you want to let's just pull our flights forward by 24 hours and let's get out of here.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I couldn't, and I went out and I went open 310, 320, missed both of those because Miss Groove couldn't touch properly, and then 330 touched easy and locked it out easy. I think some of those bigger lifts, it's about the best I've ever felt underneath the bar. But I'm pretty happy over the course. I took that Australian bench record from 260 to 340, going from 2008 to 2015.
Massive.
And I'm pretty happy that it's still mine as well. No one else has got close yet.
Yeah. What about some of the bigger comps you've done? I know you've been to all over the world lifting, and what's some of your memorable comps looking back?
I think the first Oceanias was Oceanias and Commonwealths. It was held in Christchurch, New Zealand. That's where I got to know Stephen Pritchard really well. We spent a few days hanging out together, and then Stephen and I travelled a lot together after that. Lots of overseas comp. But in that 2007 comp is where I met Ruben Samanu, who passed away last year, who was a massive, massive influence on me as a man, not just as a lifter. So I think, that 2007 comp in Christchurch was really meaningful. And then all the other ones, like where we go, Prague, that was, the Czech Republic comps, the German comps, up through Sweden, Denmark a couple of times. They all end up just being a big blur of food and drink. And somewhere in there was 3 lifts. I'm not sure where, but I think they were really fun. But for me, the biggest one was being the first Aussie to head to the Arnold Classics in America. I was talking to a guy from RTS last night about this, and what's not known about it is that Stephen Pritchard and I petitioned the organisers for about 18 months before they let us in. And unfortunately, Stephen couldn't come. Ended up being myself and Amir Fazeli. And so we had to push and push and push and tell the organisers, you've got a great comp, you've got people from all around the world, but you don't have Aussies. And if you had Aussies, it would be a much better comp. We'll bring some entertainment for you. And so we got invited to the first one because we were persistent. I got invited back the next year because they found out that I was a nice guy and that I always bought the first round of beer afterwards. So that was an advantage. And then I started hitting the podium at that event. So then I got invited back because I was actually good. And it's something that I've talked about with some up and coming lifters over the years quite a few times, is that you'll get invited back most of the time because you're a nice guy, especially these invitations. It doesn't matter how good you are. If you're an arsehole, you don't get an invite the second year.
Yeah.
And so in talking about sort of legacy within powerlifting, I barely remember my good lifts. I would imagine that nobody remembers my good lifts, but they'll remember if I'm a nice bloke or they'll remember if I'm a jerk. So most of my adventures, most of my trips are all about just trying to connect with people and be remembered as a good bloke that like to have fun and like to have a beer and a laugh.
I think it was 2015 Powerlifting Australia Nationals where I first met you, and you helped out one of the lifters that I had down there. she hadn't been lifting long. It was a masters athlete, and there was a few little things that you helped her out with, and she still remembers that. And yeah,
Oh,
so
that's nice.
it's always, you know, that's the way you remember the good things that happen in sports. You know, whether you're at the top or in the middle or at the bottom of the field, it's those sort of things that you remember. Now, are you still involved in powerlifting at the moment?
No, not really at all. I use powerlifting to train a number of female rugby players. But all the kerfuffle from about 2017 onwards, I was sort of loosely involved with some of that. Although there was a 1,000 comment thread on my Facebook page when Australia was about to get kicked out of the IPF, and so I tried to get heavily involved at that point again. Even though I wouldn't be lifting again, I just wanted to make sure powerlifting stayed open to local lifters. I still think powerlifting is about the local meets. It's not about worlds. It's not about classics. It's about 30 guys and girls getting together in a gym somewhere in the suburbs and just having a really, really cool time. And I thought with all the power plays at the top that was the bit that was suffering and was getting away from us. And so I tried to do what I could. There's so much ego involved at the upper levels that, given where I was sort of in terms of my medical conditions, I just threw my hands up and go, I've got nothing left.
Yeah.
The attraction of trying to get back to powerlifting was to lift with friends that I've made. And of the friends that I've made in the sport, in the supers, I think worldwide, you've got Kenneth Sandvik is still lifting, and that's it. And as much as I love Kent, I'm not flying to Finland just to lift weights with him. You know, that's now a cool story in my past. So
yeah.
But I do love hanging out with powerlifters and talking about powerlifting and talking about mechanics of bench pressing and squatting.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of my involvement these days.
Nice. As long as you're still involved in teaching, I guess your knowledge, it's, you know, you're still involved to powerlifting me. Whether or not you're competing or your athletes are competing, it's still, yeah, you're still involved with the sport. So
Yeah.
I love that. I know that you have coached a few people over the years. I remember when I first started getting into Equipped, you were helping out Simon Bergner and a few
That's right. Yeah.
with their bench and stuff like that. It was always good to sort of be able to touch on with you know, someone that's been there and done it. I know in Newcastle we're pretty lucky, you know, with Maxi and Richie and the likes, and now we've got a few powerlifting gyms in Newcastle, which, you know, we've got 4 or 5 comps a year now in Newcastle, which, you know, was
That's
unheard
amazing.
of back then.
Can you imagine, 10, 15 years ago, being able to forecast in the future and going, yeah, we're going to have powerlifting gyms, like gyms just for powerlifters.
Yeah.
I think it's amazing. I still remember the days of having to deadlift really, really quietly in commercial gyms.
Yeah.
With metal plates that were never 20 kilos. They were either 18 and a half kilos or they were 21 kilos. And you had to be really, really quiet and apologize for bending the bar afterwards. Because if anybody heard you deadlift, there'd be a gym owner running out going, stop, no, you're not allowed to do that here. And now we've got, like, every gym has deadlift platforms and proper bars and squat racks, and I love it. It's great.
It is fantastic. Mate, you we were talking about competitions before, and you're saying you haven't lifted for a while. I'm just on the openpowerlifting.org right now, and mate, it says you made a comeback this year in the 82 kilo class in Canada.
Yeah.
There seems to be another Nathan Baxter, I think.
Yeah, like I think my last comp I weighed in at 183 kilos. So 100-kilo weight loss to make weight. That's a few days in the sauna, isn't it?
It's a big effort. It's a big effort. Well, let's talk a little bit about your health, mate. You had a bit of a health scare there. Was it 2016 or 2017?
Yeah, end of 2016.
Okay.
Yeah.
Take us through what happened there and and the events that happen there.
I'll give you the long story because it's a fun one, and I've told it a few times now. Because like after the strokes, my cardiologist and I went back through and sort of kind of tried to unpick what went wrong, what did we miss. If you go all the way back to my childhood, to as a teenager, I went and saw a doctor once saying that my heart was doing weird things, and I didn't understand it. But when he checked me out, nothing was wrong at the time. What we know now was that it's a fairly common condition called atrial fibrillation. That just one part of my heart flutters a bit, and then I feel it in my chest. And doctor said, "Oh, you're fine." So I go, "All right, these heart flutters that I get from time to time, they're normal. Don't worry about it." So then I trained for the next 20 odd years or 25 years with a heart that wasn't fully functional. What that does to the heart over time is it'll just wear it down. And so all of that heavy lifting with my heart out of rhythm, which is what atrial fibrillation is, it's not beating in consistent time, it just weakened my heart. And so by 2013, I was getting really weird comp results. I know it in Auckland at I think it was the Commonwealth Championships. I benched 320 in the warm-up room, no problem. Went out to open on 330, and one arm moved and the other arm didn't do anything. And it happened 3 times in a row. I was with, Wilkes was with me, David James, Mike Teixeira was there, Matt Gary was there. So top coaches from around the world. None of us could work out what was going on because we just watched me warm-up room, no problem. Platform, 3-4 minutes later, what the hell's going on? Weird things like that would keep on happening from 2013, 14, 15, and 16. Over the time, I was getting more and more out of breath. So I said, "Oh, okay, I need to do more cardio." So I pushed my cardio really hard. And then in the end, I started losing all motivation towards lifting or doing anything. And what we figured out afterwards was that I was in heart failure from about 2014 onwards. So we worked that out because normally when I traveled, I didn't get any inflammation or swelling at all. But I remember flying to Copenhagen for Worlds that year, and I blew up like a balloon, just like crazy level of swelling, and then the same coming home. And I'd have sort of weird nagging left shoulder pain all the time. So I went to a couple of doctors, like lots of doctors in the end. And I said to the first doctor, "Do you think it could be my heart?" And he goes, "No, you're fine. It's not your heart. You're an athlete. You're strong. It's because you lift too many weights." Obviously, he was wrong. It was my heart. Because I never stopped and because I kept on pushing myself, I got my heart down to about 10% of what a heart should be able to do. So we're talking about a thing called an ejection fraction, which means every time your heart beats, about 2/3 of the blood should come out of your heart into circulation. That's a healthy, functioning, normal heart. Anything above 50% is considered okay. Under 50% is heart failure. I got down to 10%. So every time my heart beat, only 10% of the blood would come out into circulation. That meant I had a really high heart rate. On the day that I went into hospital, I had a resting heart rate of 170. So it's like, I don't know, for me, doing
Up a hill.
repeats or something nasty. Couldn't breathe. I was misdiagnosed. Some of the misdiagnoses that I had were, they said, "Oh, you must have a testosterone deficiency." And I got that tested. That wasn't it. Everybody at that point in time wanted to blame the thyroid for everything. So I had a doctor diagnose me with a thyroid condition. It wasn't thyroid. And then the last 3 diagnoses I had were mental health diagnoses. People saying, "Oh, you're having panic attacks. You're depressed. You were a carer for so long. I was a trauma counselor and a chaplain for so long." They said, "You've seen too much. Now you've got what do they call it? Compassion fatigue, kind of like a form of PTSD." And I was like, I don't think it's that either. And so eventually one night, I woke up in the middle of the night. I was slurring my speech. I couldn't talk properly. It sounded like I'd been on a 4-day bender. And my wife, fortunately, knew all the tests to check out for a stroke. She had me do all the tests. She said, put your arms up. I thought I put my hands out like that. What I did was this. Like, this arm just didn't do anything at all. My face on one side of my body just melted like a wax candle. My wife said, you've had a stroke? And I said, I'm not sure. Maybe we can go back to sleep and we'll deal with it in the morning. Which I think, looking back, is pretty funny and a pretty Aussie bloke way to deal with stuff. I'm glad she said no, because I don't think I would have woken up from that. So yeah, then I had paramedics come to the house, tell me, yep, you've had a stroke. We're taking you straight to hospital. And so then I spent the next 10 days in hospital, getting my heart fixed, stopping all the clots going to my brain, and figuring out what life would look like next and what I have to do.
Yeah. And now, what's the recovery like after that? I know, it can be varied on the severity of, what happened. And obviously your heart pumping at 10%, it was pretty severe. What was your recovery period after that?
I think recovery from any brain injury, particularly a stroke, is lifetime.
Yeah.
There's some things that I will never be able to do again, and I can't, like I get tripped up on now. I've been seeing a neuropsychologist recently. We did a bunch of cognitive testing just to see what I really can and can't do. On some things, I'm off the chart, sort of like genius levels, and other stuff, I'm right at the bottom end of average. So like my short-term memory is pretty rubbish, but not so bad that it stands out as being a problem. It just, I sometimes look like a kind of vague and vacant, but given the work I do, it sometimes stands out. Like an example of that would be sometimes I'll be telling a story, I'll get halfway through the story and have no idea what I'm talking about. Just like straight after the stroke for about 2 or 3 years, I would just stop in the middle of the story, not realize I'd been telling a story. I remember asking a mate one time, I said, hey, I was just telling you a story, wasn't I? And he goes, yeah, you were. I said, how long ago was that? He goes, it's a few minutes. And then I had to ask him what the story was about. What was it? An interesting story? Should I keep going with it? But yeah, I just sort of zone out on stuff.
Yeah.
Took a long time to get my speech back. That was about a year. If I get really tired, it's still a lot of effort to talk clearly and not to slur and all those sort of things. A little bit of loss of facial tone now, but that's more vanity than anything else. Left arm and left leg were paralyzed afterwards, so I had to learn how to use my left hand again. Broke a lot of coffee cups for about 4 years. So I'd always make sure I walk around with the coffee cup in the left hand, but then my brain would forget that there's something in my left hand and just let go. Coffee smashes on the floor. Very sad. Coffee should be in the body, not on the floor. So a lot of that. And then the big one that I still deal with now is they broadly categorize it as emotional dysregulation, or I just call it tends to come out as PTSD, depression.
Yeah.
So one of the lesions that I've got on my brain is in an area that sort of acts like a switchboard between the very logical front brain or the highly emotional limbic system, and decides which one goes through. And for me, any level of emotion wins. Any level of emotion will destroy logic. There's probably a bunch of really sexist jokes about that, but I won't go there with that. And then other than that, I had a few rounds of memory loss. I've had amnesia a few times, which is always interesting. And the funny thing about amnesia is somebody needs to tell you that you had amnesia. Because for me, it's just half a day that doesn't exist. For everyone else, half a day that I made no sense, and they were quite distressed. And I have a few issues with vertigo. I have one of the lesions from the stroke is on my cerebellum at the back here, which is largely responsible for coordinated movement and balance. And so sometimes I'll feel the world start to spin and I'll just go down.
Yeah.
An impromptu nap, we'll call it.
And when you get these sort of things, is there a lot of fatigue around it? So, like, say you had your amnesia for, 3 hours yesterday. Do you feel fatigued again for maybe the next day, or how's the fatigue levels and things
Oh,
now?
yeah, I probably should have mentioned. I forget it. Like the number one symptom for most people with a brain injury is fatigue. It's just, and it's different to being tired. Like you just wake up and it's like going, oh wow, that's my energy for the day. There's not much of it. So I still have problems with my heart going out of rhythm. If I have to go back to hospital to get it shocked back into rhythm, that'll be about a week of work that I'd lose. It's just tired, hard to concentrate, those kind of things, low motivation. So I tend to work half days these days to try and manage that fatigue, and try and match the tasks around how much energy I've got for the day or energy I've got for that week, and which is it's interesting because it's taught me how to be really strategic and really smart with how I spend my time each day.
Yeah. I know you mentioned to me you're working with I think it was a neuroscience guru from Canada, was it? Were you working with someone?
Arizona. Yeah.
Arizona, okay. And I guess, is that more mentoring you through, your recovery period, or what's happening there?
Oh, so the neuroscientist that I was working with, he was involved in sort of athletic design and sort of athletic development, and that was before the stroke. And so now I'm the neuroscience guru. I went and did a neuroscience degree after the stroke because I don't know. I guess that's what you do.
Learn some
If you
more.
if you have 5 holes in your brain, you definitely should go and do one of the hardest science degrees out there. So I went to uni to basically find out what they weren't telling me and to find out different strategies around cardiac rehab and stroke rehab. And so now I teach other people how to do the same, use these basic elements of how brains work and how the human body works. And we just tailor what I did both in powerlifting and with stroke rehab. And we just tailor it to whatever the individual's doing.
Okay.
What I figured out pretty quickly with rehab of any kind is that rehab is a high performance elite level skill. Being able to do all the things that I needed to do and all the mindset work and all the physical work, I needed to have that high performing powerlifting background in order to have the discipline and the mindset to be able to do things that I hated doing, that didn't feel good, but I knew if I did them for long enough, often enough, then a year from now, I would feel good. Most people don't grow up that way. They don't develop those skills.
Yeah.
And then they have a stroke or a heart attack or a major life crisis. And we go, okay, now do the rehab with all the skills that you don't have. So I teach the foundational elements of those skills to anybody that just wants to do something hard.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing, mate. Obviously going back to school and learning about this, you would have had some obviously real life experiences to tell the professors when they might have said something that you didn't disagree with. I'm sure you would have stood up a few times and, hey,
Oh,
hang on a minute.
We had some one of my favorite professors. Her name's Amanda. She's a neuroanatomy professor at the University of Western Australia. I learned so much from her, and we had some great times. When the specimens were out, you'd get these young medical students that will always talk with such conviction and authority, and will point to a brain area and go, well, if you had a stroke there, this would happen, and this is what it would look like. And Amanda would always stop them and look at me and go, Nathan, is that what happened to you? I go, no. And so, it was a really great opportunity to teach these young doctors as well that every single stroke that will present to them will look different.
Yeah.
And there'll be, because brains are so amazing and complex, and really what we understand about how brains work is just scratching the surface, and we know that there's so much more that we don't know. And so because of that complexity, it's not like one thing in, one thing out. It's damage in one area will look like, one set of things for me, and for the guy down the street will look totally different. And so you're right, that was really fun, being able to sort of just push back about the conventional thinking around brain injuries and stroke.
Yeah.
And even showing people what you can do after a stroke.
Yep.
Like I had to learn different ways of learning, because I had almost no short-term memory and a very poor working memory, so I couldn't study the way most people studied. So I just found ways of getting things to long-term memory quicker. Graduated with honors, had high distinctions all the way through, but I had to do things really, really differently to get there.
That's awesome, mate. Congratulations. Now, what are you doing now as far as your work with neuroscience? I know you're very passionate about it, and moving forward, do you have any big plans going forward, I guess, in the neuroscience industry?
Yeah, so what I'm just this, where is it? This behind me, just here, this wall hanging. I hated inspirational quotes for the longest time, but I made this canvas, and it's just a whole bunch of things that I think if people did most of these every week or every month, they would probably have a pretty good life. And so the neuroscience stuff, I wanted to do a PhD. Like, that was always the goal, but interruptions to funding due to COVID kind of put an end to that for me. And I realized what I liked best was working with individuals, especially kind of slightly crazy, a little bit unhinged people. So we always talk in business that your favorite client is yourself. So I look for crazy people that are a bit free thinking, that like the idea of doing really basically impossible tasks. So one part of what I'm setting up is a coaching business to help business owners develop really niche lifestyle businesses that are centered around kindness. My big thing, and my mission for the rest of my life, is just to point people towards kindness, and to make the world hopefully a little bit kinder when I leave. To do that is literally just listening to people's stories. Help people tell their story, help people dream big, and then help people find flow in order to get the job done. So I guess within neuroscience, my pet areas are play and flow. Teaching people to connect through play, through using play as a learning tool. Looking at some of the more cellular level mechanics about why we play at all, I find fascinating, and would love to contribute to that research sometime. And then flow is how I coach. It's what I've always done. It's trying to sort of, how to put it, sort of manufacture the environment and give people the tasks to be able to focus at a really, really high level, and then get into those states of peak experience where all you're doing is just reacting to the environment, and you go from one perfect choice to the next perfect choice. Surfers call it the green room. You see it with skateboarders when they just get into that really stylish kind of flow. That's what I teach. That's what I push. That's what I want to educate people with. I think if we had communities pursuing flow as a priority, it means that people would be playing more, people would be outside more, people would be healthier, and would see more and more creativity entering our communities, and just building these communities around fun rather than productivity or money or whatever we do these days. So yeah, that's my mission: promote kindness and teach people how to find flow.
I love it, mate. I love it. Now, anything else you want to bring up before we head off? We could probably talk for hours on all things sport and powerlifting, and But mate, it's been great having you on today. Is there anywhere where you want people to follow you on this mission for kindness?
Yeah, if you can find me on the Nathan Baxter Rebooted on Instagram. Nathan Baxter and the Nathan Baxter were taken, so I took the rebooted one. So you can follow me there. I'm trying to post a lot of really helpful things there, try to give people value. And then my website is baxterstrengthsystems.com. That's where you can find all the merchandise around how to live a really compassionate, kind life that built around flow and built around doing amazing things with amazing people.
Awesome, mate. I'll have those in the show notes for everybody anyway. But it's been great, mate, having you on, hearing your story, and there was lots there that I didn't know about. So it's always good to hear somebody's story, and wish you all the best in the future.
Cool, mate. I really appreciate it. It was a good chat.
No worries, mate. Take care.
All right, see ya.